Hello! Welcome to Habitat for Humanity Women Build series powered by Lowe's. Today we're going to be talking about screws and the different screws you should use while doing projects around the house. If you're like me, you kind of just find a screw and put it in the wall and hope it works. But there's actually a lot of variety in screws, and I think you'd know that trying to go buy them. Have you gone to Lowe's and tried to buy screws before?
No.
No? Well, if you go check out their aisle of fasteners, you'll see there are tons of different types of screws. And I've always been confused about which one I needed. So there are three basic kinds. There's drywall screws, which is a screw like this one. There are machine screws, which are screws like this one. They don't have a point on them. And then there are things like metal screws, masonry screws, wood screws. Wood screws are the other more common kind. This is a specific type of wood screw. This is a cabinet screw. So we're going to talk a little bit more about each one just to kind of give you a better understanding of what to do when you need a screw for a project at home. All right, so Michelle, why don't you pick up a screw that looks the most familiar to you? All right. What do you notice about it?
The one end that has the ridges,
Mm-hmm.
and it has the Phillips.
Yes. Exactly. Okay, so let's take this screw as our example. So this is a panhead screw. See how it's got a raised kind of circular top versus something like this screw, which has a flat head. Now, you choose the head of your screw depending on what kind of project you're doing and if you want to be able to see the screw or not. So, for example, the panhead screw is going to stay on top of the surface. This will help you from overdriving your screw too deep into, if it's, for example, a piece of wood. The flat head will allow you to drive your screw all the way down into the surface and countersink it so that it sinks down, and you can either cover that up with a little plug or it'll just stay flush with the surface or below the surface. All right, something else about this screw is that it actually has a special end on it. This is called a self-tapping screw. This means you don't have to drill a pilot hole if you're working in a more difficult surface. A pilot hole is just when you take a drill and you drill a little hole and then drill the screw in. The pilot hole can help you keep you from splitting your material that you're working with, and sometimes the screw itself can't go through that material, so you need the hole. Most screws will have this type of end. You can see that's just a little point. And then, so the anatomy of a screw is you have the drive, and like Michelle said, that's a Phillips drive. You have the head, which is in this case a pan head. Then you have the shank. Now the shank on screws varies. You can see this has a very long portion that is not threaded. So this really long portion is the shank of the screw. This one barely has one. Really doesn't have a shank at all. The reason you would have such a long shank is for doing something like decking. So this is a decking screw, and this long shank helps connect two pieces of wood together. It also can keep the drill from overheating and causing other issues while you're trying to screw down your board. So it does something called laminating, and it's when it pushes two materials together and holds them there so that they get a tighter fit than if you used a fully threaded screw. So the rough portion are the threads, and the thread is where we get part of the name for each screw and how we identify screws. So we identify screws by the thickness of their thread and their length. So for example, we have this box of screws. Can you read him what kind of screw this is?
Wood screws.
Yes, these are wood screws. Now I know this is backwards because of the camera we're using, but it's a number 10 by 4. That means it's a number 10 screw, which means that's its diameter. Something that's weird about screws is that if it's under 1/4 of an inch, it goes by a numbering system. So instead of saying it's 1/8 of an inch and 4 inches long, it says it's a number 10. Number 10 is pretty common. So again, it's going to be backwards, but I have this screw size right here. So Michelle, pick up a screw, whichever one you want, and this will help tell you what size screw. You don't need one of these. I used this for an inventory project I was working on, but if you had a bunch of screws laying around and you wanted to know what they were or you needed to find more like it, this kind of tool will help you. So Michelle chose a screw. Now she's going to put it through one of these slots to find out what size it is. So what size do you think it might be? Is it pretty loose in there?
Yeah.
Why don't you try another one?
Kind of loose.
All right, see if it'll fit in a smaller size.
Okay.
That seems like a good fit?
Yeah. It's hard to say because it's not going to.
Yes.
I think that's one.
All right, so what size do you think that screw is?
That is a number 8.
Yeah, a number 8. Excellent. And again, that is how, or that number has to do with the diameter of the threads. So how big of a circle they make. Now, like I said, the other number on this box is a 4. That means it's a 4-inch nail. That second number will tell you the length of the screw. Well, sorry, I said nail. It's true for nails as well. So, we'll see, this is a nice long screw. All right, and screws have different coatings on them because they're meant to be for different jobs, basically. So the decking screw is coated with a protective coating, which means it can be out in the weather. But a silver screw like this, a shiny screw, that's going to get rusty if you take it outside. So this is an indoor screw. All right. So Michelle, now we're going to match up screws with some bits because, like I said, part of a screw is the drive type. Why might there be different types of drives? Any idea? Okay. So there are different types of drives because those are the drive is like how the screw and the bit connect. So if you're using a drill, you'll use a drill bit. This is a Phillips drill bit, much like the screwdriver. We've got our Phillips screw, and they connect like this. Now, a drill spins really fast, and it moves the screw by pushing against the different slots. And so you can have just a slotted head, which is just a single slot. What bit do you think goes with a slotted screw?
Oh.
There you go. A flathead. Just like that. So it just slides right in there and it stays. Now, most of the bits you're going to find and screws you're going to find are probably going to be slotted or Phillips in your daily use. They're the most common. But if you were doing a more specific project, you'll probably start finding some more unique head types and drive types. So this is called a Tapcon screw. It's for drilling into concrete or cinder block. And this has a slot, which means you could use the slotted screw like we did with the other one. Or you could use a socket, like we talked about with, you can have socket drives. This is just the drill bit version. So it just clips on there and it spins. So as I was saying earlier, the different types of drives give you better control and more power. That's called torque. So you're able to keep your drill steady so that it doesn't bounce off the screw. You don't strip the screw as easily, and you're able to drive it in sometimes faster or harder. So for example, we've got a square. This is called a Robertson. This isn't as common in the US, it's a little more common in Canada, but you'll find them. So why don't you see if you can find the drill bit that goes with the Robertson. Are you sure it wasn't the other one?
What's that?
Mm-hmm.
I got it right.
You did. You second guessed yourself.
I just didn't know how to put them in together. There you go.
Yeah. So it's kind of a square shape to go with it. It's kind of like that block game you had as a kid that you push the little shapes through the holes. It's kind of like that. Yes. Okay. So that's a Robertson. And we have, this is called a Torx head. It's kind of a star. You can also find it as a star bit. I don't know if you'll be able to see that detail. But Shell, let's see if you can find the one that belongs to that bit. This is my favorite drill bit and drive type because it has pretty good hold compared to some of the other ones. Especially if you're driving a screw into a difficult surface, it can really make a difference. And again, this one has more points of connection, which means it stays connected better.
I am failing at this.
Well, you'll eventually run out of screws to try.
And I'll still fail at it.
Yeah. Excellent. So it's our cabinet screw. You can see it's kind of got a star at the top. Now, these do come in different sizes as well. You're not going to be able to necessarily buy one star and be able to do all star-shaped screws, and same with any of the others. But for the most part, you'll buy them and it'll be a pretty standard size. And a lot of times screws will come with the drill bit that matches them. Okay, so I'm just about done talking about different parts of the screw. It might seem a little bit boring and tedious, but it really does matter what type of screw you use because these are what's going to be holding together whatever your project is. So for example, if you're putting together cabinets and hanging them on your wall, you want to make sure you're using a screw that's strong enough and that's not going to pull through. So if you used a flathead screw for your cabinets, if you put too much weight on it, your cabinets will just pull right off of them because there's nothing to brace them like there would be with a pan head. All right. The last thing to talk about is the threads, if they're coarse or fine. So you can see that that one's got much fewer threads than this one. Why do you think there might be a difference between the thread types? It does. And type to type, for sure. So most screws are going to be a coarse thread because they're just kind of to hold things. You don't really need to adjust them. But especially machine screws are going to be a finer thread because that gives you more opportunity for adjustment. And it also can give you a slightly stronger hold that you don't necessarily need when you're using these types of screws. This is a drywall screw, by the way. It's got a coarse thread. It has what you call a bugle type It's got a little bit of a lip on it. So if you're working with drywall and want to hang stuff on your walls, use a drywall screw. You don't need to use a decking screw. Longer doesn't necessarily mean better. It really depends on what the material you're using is. So thank you for watching. I hope that was helpful, that you could at least go find some screws that you need a little bit easier and hopefully make the fastener aisle a little less intimidating. Thanks for watching.